Graphic design is essentially visual communication. It's a creative process that uses art and technology to communicate ideas. It uses symbol, type, color, and illustration, and the graphic designer produces visual compositions that are meant to attract an audience, to inform an audience, and to persuade a given audience. A good graphic designer can memorably arrange both text and image for the benefit of both. So that arrangement, the way the text relates to the image and vice versa, enhances the message overall or the purpose of the design overall. Much of graphic design involves designing materials to be printed or viewed on a screen. So graphic design work can include books, magazines, posters, and imagery for electronic media. Such design ranges in scale and complexity from postage stamps and trademarks to magazine pages, film, video, personal, digital screens, websites, and apps. It is the most frequent art form that we can encounter in our daily lives. It is literally everywhere around us. We're looking at an example on screen by Michael Bierut, his redesign of the Saks Fifth Avenue logo. So the challenge that the designer was given was how to take something that just about anyone would recognize, something that as it has been a visual standard for so long that the viewer would have associations having to do with quality and excellence that were related to it. So the problem is how to take something and refresh it for a contemporary audience, but not draw attention away from the characteristics of the brand that are so valued, right? So by recombining aspects of the original logo, it looks cutting edge and more modern. It's still recognizable. Everyone who's ever taken home a Saks bag would know what they were looking at here, but it also looks very innovative, if not even a little disorienting or eye-catching at first glance. So Beirut is a good example of the challenges presented to all designers at some level, which is basically how to solve a problem and how to present the solution. Typography is the art and technique of composing printed material in terms of letter forms or designing the letter forms themselves. A complete set of letter forms, including all capitals, lowercase, numerals, and accent marks, is called a typeface. Some people use the term font interchangeably with typeface. Our graphic design professors would probably give you a more specific way to use the term font. I think it's fairly safe to think of font as a size-specific variation of a typeface. Many European style typefaces are based on capital letters that were carved in stone by the early Romans. Roman letters are made with thick and thin strokes, ending in serifs, short lines with pointed edges at an angle to the main strokes. And so we can see an example to the left-hand side of your screen here of both what a typeface with a serif looks like and what without a serif or sans serif looks like. While there are exceptions, serif fonts are widely known for being traditional, conservative, elegant, formal, or established. On the right-hand screen, we see some examples of various sort of revisions of well-known brands that in some cases, the original logo is in serif and the redo has been made in sans serif and then vice versa. So let's take a look at the Gap, the example of the Gap redo here. On the left is the original logo, which is in serif. And if you look just to the right, you can see just how fundamentally different the sans serif version of it is. I think that there was an attempt, at least at one point, to try to reposition the Gap as a more modern company, but fans and diehard customers really missed the sort of class sense of it being a classic brand that the logo communicated, right? The elegance that the design of the logo represented. Sans serif fonts do not have serifs. Remember those little feet-like strokes, right? They do not have serifs extending from the bars or the beams of their letters. This more simple design brings different uses and connotations. And while there are exceptions, again, sans serif fonts are typically associated with being modern, clean, young, and friendly. I think the Walmart example in the middle of your screen here, right? The Walmart, the original is in sans sans serif, and look what happens when we fancy it all up with all those serifs. It's just not the same thing. So we've mentioned a few terms that relate to typography, but here we're seeing examples of how the choice of typography communicates something about the brand itself. Donald Meeker and his associates designed this font because they thought they could improve the readability of white on green interstate freeway signs. Using the existing freeway sign font as a starting point, they expanded the hollow spaces in the lowercase letters, such as the E's and the A's in this case. And they also narrowed the size ratio between lower and uppercase letters. They made a few more other subtle changes, such as adding a base to the lowercase l. And we can see that in Everglades and in Boulevard as well, that little base there. The Federal Highway Administration tested the new font in all kinds of weather and all kinds of lighting conditions for readability, also using drivers of varying visual capabilities, let's say, and they found that the font was more quickly legible than the old typeface. So they approved this new font for interstate highways in 2004, and it's gradually replacing the old ones across the United States as new signs are required. Heidi Cody is a designer that makes an ironic use of typography in her piece, The American Alphabet. She uses 26 different fonts to recreate the alphabet. She found all of the letters in the initials of corporate logos. So it's kind of fun to sort of scan the image and see the ones that you can recognize more easily. I see a C for Campbell's. I see the R for Reese's peanut butter cups, the M for M&M's, the L for Lysol, perhaps, right? So think about how many of these you recognize and how quickly you recognize them, and how what we're really seeing are corporate logos that relate to things that we buy, purchase, or consume, right? So in a very kind of ironic way, Cody is drawing a connection between something that is so fundamental to our lives, like the alphabet, and the recognizability of corporate logos and the consumerism that can be associated with those things. And so she's kind of drawing a connection between consumerism and our identity as a society here. She says, I try to get viewers to consciously acknowledge how indoctrinated or branded they are. In our age, when image seems to be everything, companies spend large amounts of money on graphic design to present the best identity package. Among the most pervasive symbols in our visual environment today are the logos, which are the symbols of an organization or a project or a product. A graphic designer creates work to convey a specific message. They want to avoid ambiguity and too much open-ended interpretation. The designer is under contract to a client who wants to communicate something specific about their product or about their service or about who they are as a corporation, right? So the logo then is an identifying mark or a trademark based on letter forms and combined with other pictorial elements. So if we look at the UPS logo, for example, the early version of it by Paul Rand on the right, it instantly calls to mind the company and all of its products and all of its services. As with any symbol, the logo means nothing in and of itself. The company must make its logo familiar and persuasive through sound business practices that over time become associated with it. In the case of UPS, its service, its timeliness, and its quality. A logo like this is often the fundamental element of an overall brand identity program. This is a larger design undertaking that unifies an organization's overall visual presence, right? So it's based on appearances. So we're talking now not just about the logo, but a whole package. So guidelines for typography, for color, for imagery are developed, and they are often used in things like business letterhead or business cards, any packaging being used by the business, their websites, even their office design. This is about projecting a consistent image that reflects how the organization wants to be perceived. So in 2003, as UPS moved into the digital age, from packaging and shipping to also managing logistics as well, the company outgrew its 42-year-old iconic logo, which is the image that we see on the left. Celebrated in the design community for its connection to legendary designer Rand, the original logo and its old-fashioned bow gestured to the company's roots in neighborhood package delivery. It had humor and a humanity to it, one critic said. But the new logo represents a strategic decision to emphasize UPS's expanded business operations. And analysts also praised the company Future Brands designers for the way that it retained and maybe even nodded to the UPS's heritage by keeping the shield as a part of the new logo, and also keeping it lighthearted and using the color brown for its broad appeal at the same time, right? Okay, posters. Combine type and images in a single panel designed to provide information. An effective poster will, in a flash, both attract our attention and convey its message at the same time. The creativity of a poster designer is directed towards a specific purpose, which may be to advertise and it might be to persuade. It might also be a social message of some kind, right? 19th century posters were mostly lithographs. We've seen a few examples of those by Toulouse-Lautrec. Early lithographic posters were all hand-drawn. Designers added color to their work by printing the same sheet with multiple stones, one for each color. In the 1920s and 30s, advances in printing methods made high-quality mass production print possible, including the printing of photographs at large scale with text. Since the 1950s, radio, television, and print advertising have overshadowed posters in some ways. A well-designed poster can still fulfill the needs for communication, especially throughout history. Many social causes have found vivid expression in posters, and also political causes, and even propaganda, as in the case of Nazi war propaganda during World War II. So if we take a look at the screen right now, we can see a poster that was made by the Guerrilla Girls. In the 1980s and the 1990s, the Guerrilla Girls made activist posters protesting the inadequate representation of women in the art world. Their poster about the Metropolitan Museum of Art uses a nude figure from a famous 19th century painting. The oversized gorilla mask that the figure is wearing is the standard headgear for the group whenever they make public appearances. So there's an anonymity there. The bright yellow background is in its bold sans serif font, immediately draws attention to the text as well. The Guerrilla Girls plastered these posters in many locations near the museum and in other parts of New York City where galleries were located. And this served as a protest, a form of protest. This uses layering of images, film clips, and spoiled type that nervously twitches across the screen with hand-lettered credits over a soundtrack by Nine Inch Nails. Most importantly, this haunting close-up sequence has a function in the script. It introduces the audience to the mind of the killer, who does not appear until 40 minutes into the film. Cooper said that his aptitude for vivid graphics came in part from his early study at Yale with Paul Rand, one of America's legendary designers and the designer of the original UPS logo that we looked at a few minutes ago. Although title sequences are a digital medium, many motion graphics designers still crave that hand-drawn look. Karen Fong, for example, created a fast-moving and revealing sequence for the television series Rubicon. The title sequence follows a hand-drawn yellow chalk line through lists of data, pages of computer printouts, barcodes, maps, censored documents, aerial photographs, and short film clips. It hints at a person searching for connections among clues found in various kinds of evidence, just as the lead character of the series does. Fong's specialty is title sequences for movie and television programs. She says, "I've always been interested in the relationship between image, story, and word. Motion graphics today provide opportunities for new narrative structures and new ways of telling a story. The world of filmmaking is opening up," she says, because people are accepting and expecting the integration of animation and live action and type. So it's becoming a new language, and that's very exciting. As more and more of our media become interactive, designers work to organize the information presented and also to keep the designs attractive. Things like cell phone apps, games, software, but also the interiors of cars or any place where people are called upon to engage with a product or a service is a field of design that falls under the heading interactive design. This is a huge territory in what is increasingly becoming a more and more design-centered universe. One example of interactive design is the QR code, also known as a quick response code, and they're everywhere these days, including the hallways of our building where students are right now voting using QR codes. They're voting on their choice of the best design for our student show poster. So in 2009, though, the N building by the Terada Design architecture firm in Japan was groundbreaking for its use of a QR code built right into the surface. So scanning a QR code with any kind of device could bring up a website, a video, an app, or any kind of other information. This building builds interactivity into its surface. Scanning the QR code, if you're standing in front of it, will show you information about the building's hours of operation, about sales that are taking place in the stores inside, even recent tweets by users who walk in its hallways. The designers of the building created an alternative to billboards. Instead of pushing content on everyone, as most outdoor displays do, the information in the N building is accessible only if a consumer asks for it by activating its QR codes. Websites are still a major source of information for all of us, and a well-designed website can make gathering information pleasurable. The website for the Codex Atlanticus won several awards for its clear solution to the really challenging task of presenting 1,119 drawings by Leonardo da Vinci. Viewers can select groups of drawings by date or by subject. The website allows isolation and rearrangement of the selected groups in a detailed view. Clicking on an individual sheet shows front and back in zoomable high resolution, with a sidebar showing other drawings with similar content. All of this information unfolds clearly in both English and in Italian and without overloading the user. So this sort of user-centered design, interactive design, this is a very widely varied design field. It's very involved with understanding the way people behave in spaces or behave with their objects. So empathy, so a user design, a designer working in the field of interactive design has to be able to plug themselves into the point of view of a user of a thing for the first time, right? So a lot of an understanding of human psychology and awareness and empathy is involved in the creating effective and interesting user-centered designs. While there is room for creativity in graphic design, the main thing that sets it apart is that a designer must respond to a client's needs. There are some designers today who do freelance work as well, which is more fine art driven. Some people in the past have argued that graphic design is not an art form because it is commercial. But there are many artists whose work challenges any kind of distinction between fine art and graphic design, particularly in illustration. So those kinds of differentiations seem a little outdated today when artists and designers more often than not work across many different fields and many different disciplines. You don't have to only do one thing anymore. The field of illustration is one of those areas that lies in between graphic design created to represent a client brand and fine art created to express an artist's independent creative idea. Illustrations, broadly speaking, are meant to accompany a text and or represent characters in that text, right? And I'm showing you just a small sampling of what could be an entire course in and of itself, the study of the history of illustration. Aubrey Beardsley's illustration, The Climax, was created to accompany a pivotal scene in Oscar Wilde's play Salome, in which the title character holds up the severed head of John the Baptist. Beatrix Potter, in the upper portion of your screen, was an English writer, illustrator, natural scientist, and conservationist. She's best known for her children's books featuring animals, such as The Tale of Peter Rabbit, which was her first commercially published work in 1902. Manga comics are graphic novels originating from Japan. Most manga conform to a style developed in Japan in the late 19th century, but the form has a long history even earlier in Japanese art. The term manga is used in Japan to refer to both comics and cartooning. So there are so many aspects of design related fields that we've really just scratched the surface here in talking about game design, smartphone apps. There's also furniture design, interior design, editorial illustration, children's books, clothing and costume design, and more. So for all of these reasons, design is one of the most commonly experienced aspect of art in our lives today.